Racing has a rich and vibrant history right throughout Victoria. It's estimated there's around 1,000 different locations that at one point in time hosted a race meeting. And on They Once Raced Here, we're going to take you on a journey to guide you through some of that history, which you, Chris, have researched extensively. There must have been a lot of nights burning the midnight oil with this research.
Probably too many, Ed, probably too many. And you're right, I mean, there's probably around 1,000 locations all across Victoria. Racing played such a fundamental part in the history of Australia, the history of Victoria. It was such an important thing to a lot of towns, and we're here today in Wood End, one of my favourites, and what's so good about the Wood End racecourse is that we've still got infrastructure here. We've still got a grandstand, we've got a finishing tower, we've got those types of things here. So it's a great example of a former racecourse.
And is that something unique when you looked at all the different racecourses that you've A, visited and B, researched?
Look, probably maybe 30 or 40 have some degree of infrastructure. Wood End's probably a great example. You know, in this series we're going to see some others. There's places like Newstead that still have some of that sort of stuff as well, right? So, but Wood End is one of those great examples of a racecourse that is no longer here, but has a very rich history. So the first race in Wood End was Boxing Day 1859. But it was actually up on top of the hill up there, and it was a 2-day meeting. They had 10 races over 2 days, but it wasn't a great spot. Like the side of a hill, not usually the best spot for a race course. So they found a better location, which was here. And this used to be a volunteer reserve for the Army. It got gazetted to the town, to the people, early 1900s, and became the Wood End Racecourse, which was then used through until that final race meeting, which was held on the 24th of July, 1982, right here where we're standing.
This is where thousands of punters would have gathered here at Wood End to watch the races. Now, Chris, we're not far from Melbourne. You've got neighbouring towns like Kyneton and like Gisborne. How popular a venue was this?
Oh, really popular, Ed. You know, you're absolutely right. You know, one of the great things about a lot of these racecourses around Victoria was the train network. And pretty much in the earlier days, right, it was the only way to get around before the motor vehicle became very commonplace. So the train was really important to transport the horses and transport the punters here. Wood End Station's not far from here, and so there would have been a lot of people that came here. I mean, I personally know a number of people I've spoken to that used to make their way up from Melbourne for midweek meetings, even come up to watch trials during the week here. So it was a very, very popular racecourse.
And it was a punting crowd as well too. You hear stories that on a Saturday meeting here you get 60 to 70 bookmakers operating in the betting ring, operating on races here, races in Melbourne, also interstate.
Yeah. So, you know, and that was a big part of it all, right? A big part of racing, you know. So for a lot of people, it is about the punting. But for many, it was just to come along, right? And you can look out around this and it would have been a beautiful place to come and watch the races. You know, yes, there would have been people punting here, but there would have been people around the course having a picnic, just enjoying themselves with their family. I mean, it was said to be a quite a big family race course. In fact, a lot of the race books here talk about, you know, family meetings in this spot.
And for people who weren't supposed to be punting, the jockeys, their room was right up close to the betting ring as well too. I've heard allegedly that they were able to stick their head out of the window from the jockeys' room, have a look at the betting ring just to see whether the market was giving their horse a chance or not. Top jockeys were in that room, by the way, too. This is one of the first tracks in Victoria that the legendary Roy Higgins rode at. Alan McLean, Steve Burridge, they all rode plenty of winners here at Wood End. We're now at the secondary grandstand here at Wood End, and you can tell, Chris, the way it's shaped. This is the turn out of the straight. The other interesting thing you see here, the old Stewards Tower.
Yeah, that's right, Ed. You know, I mean, you don't see many of these, right? It's a great reminder of the past. You don't see many in, you know, such good condition, and I know that doesn't look great, but that's in pretty good condition for how these things are. But you don't see a lot of these things, right? So it's a great spot, you know, for the steward to be looking down the straight, which was down here. Probably had a better view in the days before this tree grew here, but you know, that's what happens on these former race courses. And you know, to me, things like this are an important part of why I set about this journey of documenting all these former race courses. This is why I enjoy doing this research into racecourses because it's documenting these things for the years to come. When people say, well, they didn't race there, well, yes, they did.
The officials at Woodend were housed in this tower here, including the race cooler located quite close to ground level. People like Brian Blackmore, John Russell, Ray Benson all called the races here, and being close to ground level it also meant there was great banter between the callers and the crowd. The other thing to note, this is where the photo finish would have been.
Yeah, so there would have been a photo finish in here. Said to be one of the first courses in Victoria to have a photo finish. So a great way to obviously adjudicate, because there are many stories out there of who actually won those races and what that looked like. But with a photo finish, probably a little bit hard to argue, so a good example of that.
We've made our way to the side of the track here at Woodend because the action's not only in the home straight. This is the only surviving distance marker at Woodend Racecourse, 700 to go. This is quite unique, Chris.
Yeah, it's very unusual, Ed. You don't see 700 metre markers. You'll see 2, 4, 6 furlongs, but you don't see 700. So the actual course itself was 8.5 furlongs. So again, a little bit unusual. So 1,700 metres. It wasn't originally that length. When they first made the course, it was a little bit shorter, but they managed to get a little bit more land over on the east side there. They extended the course. They moved some of the buildings, and they set themselves up with a 2 furlong straight to finish off, which is pretty good. The course by the 1940s had a continuous rail, which again was a little bit unusual in those times. A lot of the courses had railed straights on the inside and the outside, protect the public, keep the horses away, and they would use bamboo poles around the rest of the course. But this one definitely had a continuous rail, and it was said to be about 2 chains, so about 40 metres wide in places. A decent sized racecourse. And
quite a decent home straight as well too, a nice long 400 metre home straight.
Yeah, a good run, a good run home. You don't see that on all of these courses. You see some of them, a little bit Moonee Valley-like, that tight turn into the finish, but they'd obviously thought about it here and they'd set themselves up with a good finish.
Is there another claim to fame that Woodend has?
The other claim to fame, and a lot of people will claim this one, is that one of the first to use a starting gate. And so starting gates haven't been around all that long, really, if you go back in time, and we just take them for granted, the starting gates. A lot of our courses have multiples of them, right? But they used to share them between courses. Woodend is said to be one of the first ones to have one. I don't know how much truth is in that, because I've heard that claim from a lot of racecourses.
Well, you know what we say though, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Absolutely.
Over 120 years of racing history came to an end. Woodend held the last race meeting in 1982. So Chris, why did they stop racing here?
Well, for some period of time, the government have been cracking down on racing, the authorities have been cracking down because there was a lot of it going on. And it was becoming very uneconomical to keep all of these courses going. It's quite an expensive exercise. So finally, they cracked down on Woodend. They forced it to merge with nearby Kyneton. The final meeting was held here on Saturday the 24th of July. The final race here was won by Newry Boy.
Okay, you've kept the race book as a souvenir from that day. The legacy of Woodend still lives on though, because you've got the Woodend Cup at Kyneton in the early part of February, and you can still see the remnants here. So there is still that history and that legacy.
There is, and you will still get locals from Woodend that will go to that race meeting and think of it as their own meeting, and that's pretty common. You have Ballan still racing at Geelong. You have many examples of that across Victoria.
What's left of Woodend Racecourse? What is it used for now?
So as you can see, and quite usually, so there's about 50 acres, give or take, because you pretty much needed that to have a decent sized racecourse. It's used by the public. So you've got a recreation area down there. This is being used for equestrian and pony type events. And having visited here a number of times, particularly on the weekend, the local community is very active down here, walking their dogs. It's even good for the wildlife, Ed. Just before we had a few kangaroos running through here.
A part of racing in this part of Victoria. Chris, thanks so much. It's been wonderful to chat about the history of racing here at Woodend. Looking forward to travelling far and wide across Victoria with you as we visit places they once raced at.